All right, guys, we are going to wrap up the legislative branch. I know we already started some of this, so we'll do a quick review and then cover the new stuff. This will be on your test. So feel free to pause when you need to and write down some notes. But the important thing is you need to understand your notes. So don't just be writing it down while I'm talking. You got to understand, listen to what I'm saying so it makes sense. So we've already gone over this. So the House of Representatives, youngest age 25, 7 years, resident of the state. They're only elected for 2 years. It's based on population. That's why the number's so high. California's got the most. Everybody gets 1. Wisconsin, we get 8. So as a state, we're not that powerful in the House of Representatives. We already talked about the House votes on impeachment. For charges of impeachment, they bring the charges of impeachment. And then they're dealing with revenue. We talked about Johnson and Clinton for impeachment. We talked about the proceedings with Trump. And then we talked about how a bill becomes a law. We've gone over this quite in depth with introduced and subcommittees and putting stuff on the calendar and changes and amendments and then going to the other side. And we've gone over that. But if you don't have this written down in your notes anywhere, you probably should. So feel free to pause if you're not there yet. Okay, we went over you guys proposing laws and went over the process. So jumping into these House of Representatives leadership positions, right now, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. The majority party right now is Democrats, so they get to choose the leader of the House, which is Nancy Pelosi. The minority group in the House of Representatives is then the Republicans. This is Kevin McCarthy. He is the minority leader. So the Speaker has some power. This lists what they can do. Floor debate, they're calling on people, they're assigning bills to certain committees, and they're putting members on certain committees. So, and each party gets to, put their people on the committees that they think is the most important, and vice versa when either party's in control. So it's a pretty important thing. The minority party, so currently Kevin McCarthy is the head of that, is going to give the opposite view or the opposing view, not always opposite. So if Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats come up with an idea and they start talking about it, Kevin McCarthy is going to talk to the Republicans and they're going to form their message and they're going to respond to this message. So that way, hopefully, we always get to hear both sides of each story or each idea. And that's supposed to be the goal, where we get informed consent and everybody is well educated on the topic and then we vote. So that's the way it's supposed to turn out. Okay, so to get into the other side of Congress, because the House of Representatives is one side, the House is the other, or the Senate is the other. You have to be 30, so remember, there's only 2 per state, so it's a little hard to get into. Got to be citizen for 9 years, obviously live in your state. You're elected for 6 years, so that's way better than the House, because they only get 2. So you get to actually govern for 5 years and then run for re-election. And then of those 100 senators, we rotate them, the elections every 2 years. So say we start right now, brand new Senate. In 2 years, we're electing 33 of them. 2 years after that, we're electing another 33. And then 2 years after that, we elect the other 33. And then 2 years after that, 8 years out, that first group runs for re-election. So that way we're not having everybody rotating in the same election. So it gives us a little continuity. We already talked about the state. For Wisconsin, we had Sean Duffy and Tammy Baldwin. Tammy Baldwin is still the Wisconsin senator. Sean Duffy has retired. He had a family situation and wanted to be with his family. So we have not had a special election yet to elect his replacement. So that's kind of weird. That's kind of different in history. You don't often have a senator just retire like that. Usually they just say, I'm not running for re-election, and then they pick new people. Okay, so here's the unique strategy for Congress. The filibuster. The goal is to oppose a bill. That's why I highlighted it in yellow. So a senator holds the floor indefinitely. Basically, the Speaker of the House or the Senate pro temp of the Senate, President pro temp of the Senate calls on the person. So if that's me, I'm raising my hand. I want to get called on. They call on me. I go down to the podium and I start talking. And I don't yield. I don't give in to anything. I refuse to stop talking. And they can't really interrupt me. They can, but we'll get to that in a second. I can talk about whatever I want. I can talk about my favorite memories as a kid. I can talk about my favorite recipes. One of my favorite filibusters is, because it gets covered on C-SPAN, they always show it live on C-SPAN, is a senator pulled some books out of his briefcase and read nighttime stories to his children who would be watching at home. So I thought that was endearing. But I've seen filibusters where they're literally just reading from a book to the audience. One was reading his favorite recipes. You can do that. You can yield for a question, and you can yield for a point of order, and you can do stuff like that, but you're not yielding your possession of being able to talk. And if you can hold it indefinitely, you can postpone a vote. You can stop a vote. The way that works is you can say, this bill that we're going to vote on has to be voted on by midnight tonight or it's dead. And if I do a filibuster and I will talk for as many hours as it takes, currently it's about 10 after 8. So if I talk for 4 hours, boom, can't vote on it. I just stop the passage of a bill. Now, they have since passed a bill where we can end a filibuster, okay? But you need to have more than 50%, so you can stop that. So the big question is it a good idea that the minority be able to stop the majority? Should we allow one person or a handful of people to stop a bill from passing? And you could say, well, no, if the majority wants it, but what if you say, well, they're going to pass a law where, it affects you negatively, it takes money out of your family's pocket. Then you're going to be very mad and you'd want someone to stop it. There's a famous movie with the filibuster, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Great movie. Yes, I know it's in black and white, but it's a goodie, okay? So this kind of shows how they've done filibusters and how the number has been going up and up and up over the years. In the civil rights era, they were doing filibusters to stop civil rights, to stop voting rights, to stop school busing. This is when we were going through the whole integration period and ending segregation. So there were some senators that purposely talked to delay the signing of bills forcing the end of segregation. Okay, so why do you do a filibuster? Well, you want to stop a bill, okay? You want to stop it from passing. You want to delay it so you can talk about it more, get it out in the open. A filibuster is a great way to draw attention to a bill because it is one senator talking for sometimes hours and hours and hours, okay? Or to reach a compromise. If me and I get 4 buddies and we're going to rotate, I'll talk for 2 hours, and then I'll call on one of them and they'll talk for 2 hours. We could keep the 5 of us going for a very long time. That could force a compromise. So while I'm talking, the 4 people in my group are working with the other party trying to say, hey, we're okay with this, but we want you to reduce it by 1%, And that's how you get concessions and compromises. So it's also a good tactic for that. So should the filibuster be outlawed? Well, that's your opinion. Some people say it's a great way for the minority to be protected. Some people say it just really slows down and wastes our time, especially when you have important legislation. So now what are the powers of the Senate? So this is not the House. This is the Senate. So that's important to know, okay? They can impeach officials. Remember we talked about how they're like the jury in a trial. They're going to vote basically guilty, not guilty. They confirm presidential appointments. A great example would be appointments to the Supreme Court, okay? So the president gets to pick the judge they want. The Senate has to confirm them. The Senate has to say, you know what? They're a good judge, okay? The president could pick me to be a judge, because guess what? There's really no qualifications. Now, is the Senate going to confirm me? I hope not. I have zero law experience at all. I just know you're not supposed to speed, stuff like that. They ratify treaties, and that's a 2/3 majority, so that's 66%. And that's for other countries, that's for Native Americans, stuff like that. This happens on occasion. So who's in charge of the Senate? Technically, the Vice President. And right now our Vice President is Mike Pence. And he also has the tiebreaker. Remember, we have 100 senators. Well, we don't have 100 senators right now. Sean Duffy has retired. But when the Vice President's not there, it is the President Pro Tem, which is this man, Charles Grassley. So Charles Grassley, very, very happy to be the President of the Senate. We talked about impeachment. This is just a newspaper article from the Washington Post showing that they voted articles of impeachment against President Clinton. So the two houses of Congress are the House of Representatives and the Senate, okay, with a big S. All right, main duty of Congress, it might look a little sloppy, but they propose bills which sometimes become laws, okay? And all that together is legislation. They're creating laws, they're creating regulations, they're creating things, okay? So, bill to become a law, well, we kind of covered that in depth, so I'm going to skip over this one. And then we go on to the judicial branch. And guess what, guys? We're not covering the judicial branch today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to and leave it on how a bill becomes a law. Because this is important. You need to know this. So, introduced, sent to a subcommittee, marked up, talked about, amended, changed. Then it's voted on by the committee. It's put on the calendar for the full House or Senate, same on both sides. And then they read it, debate it, amend it, talk about it, and then they vote on it. Okay? Remember, if it passes, it goes over here. And then they have to vote it on the other side, and if it's exactly the same, then it can go to the president. If it gets changed, it has to go back, okay? You can also have joint committees, super committees. But anyway, if it passes here, it goes to the president. The president can sign it into law. The president can veto it, or the president can do what's called a pocket veto, where he just kind of puts it in a drawer and ignores it. You can also have where they ignore it and it becomes a law. It really depends on when things... And some presidents will sign things that they don't want, but they know they're going to get beat on it. The other thing is if a president vetoes it, if they say, nope, don't want it, they can come back and they can override the presidential veto. You need a 2/3 vote, which is pretty rare, but you can override the president's veto. So, all right, so this is the end of the legislative branch. Make sure you know it. Make sure you took notes on it. Feel free to go back through the video and pause, because it will be on your test. Have a great rest of the day, guys.